I would like to talk with you briefly about innovative uses of ICTs from around the world, promising ideas and issues to consider. I thought I would start with a picture. I don't know if this picture rings any bells for you, and no, it's not some sort of prepackaged World Bank solution being airlifted and dropped into Africa. It is a picture of the first commercial hard drive, 1954. This version cost about 500,000 US dollars, and it had less capacity than this small memory stick I have here in my hand that someone gave to me for free. I mention this to note that things change, as you all know, very quickly in the technology area. They change because of innovation. I mean, what is innovation? Innovation for many people is represented by a light bulb. It's a positive change, they say, a positive new change. And for many people, ICTs, information and communication technologies, are equated with innovation. I'm not sure if you heard this quote recently from an African leader, but I'll read it to you. It says, "I believe that the mobile phone is destined to revolutionize our educational system, and that in a few years, it will supplant largely, if not entirely, the use of textbooks. It is possible to touch every branch of human knowledge through the mobile phone." Now, if you heard one of your leaders say that, she was actually quoting an earlier statement by an earlier president talking about the potential for the internet being destined to revolutionize our educational system. And if you heard that person, they were actually talking, paraphrasing an earlier pronouncement about the potential of the computer. And all of these go back to a statement by Thomas Edison in 1922 about the potential for the motion picture to revolutionize what we do in education. I mention this to note that lots of the excitement and the potential we've seen that are embodied by technologies, we've been thinking about these things for a long time in certain places, in certain contexts. We don't always know the answers, however, but some of the fundamentals, I think, remain the same. I'm going to talk quickly around 5 themes: around content, around community, around things that are personal, around things that are mobile, and how to measure all this stuff. But perhaps I should back up and apologize. You heard my introduction. I'm Mike Trucano. I work at the World Bank on ICT and education issues. I apologize as well if my accent, I'm from Minnesota in the United States, if that is in any way difficult for you to understand, and I apologize that I'm not able to greet you in Swahili this evening. I also apologize for using PowerPoint. As a technology specialist at the World Bank, we're expected to do such things. So with that said, I'm going to give you quickly 100 additional slides in about 10 minutes. My job at the World Bank, if you will, is to help the World Bank and its developmental partners get smart. Actually get smarter. I think we're all pretty smart in the room about appropriate, relevant, effective, and just as importantly, inappropriate, irrelevant, and ineffective uses of technologies to aid a wide variety of developmental objectives, including those that we'll be talking about here this week related to education. Asking, what do we know about using technology in education in developing countries, and especially what do we know about using it effectively? Now, the book has been a primary tool used in schools for almost a millennium. And everyone is familiar with this picture. Now, as the book is transformed in many places, in many cases, to something that we're calling an e-book, and here's an e-book, for example, that holds the entire Wikipedia in the palm of your hand, that runs off 2 AAA batteries, or AA batteries, will last an entire year. We see the potential for change of existing tools that we already have in ways that are familiar to us. We see across Africa and the world the use of radio to aid developmental objectives. Here are some countries that we've been involved with at the World Bank to try to use radio to support, especially support teachers in their teaching practices. We, of course, note the use of computers, and this picture could be from almost any country around the world, a young boy sitting in front of a computer as part of his studies. We see the use of educational television still important in many parts around the world. Here is a character from Sesame Street who visited the World Bank to talk about some educational activities in South Africa. And increasingly, we start to hear at least talk about this, the use of the mobile phone. We see innovations in low-cost laptop technologies. We see innovations for tablet computers like the iPad, but I don't want to talk anymore about all of this cool technology. No. I have a few questions for you. First question, how might we think about innovating in education with the aid of new technologies, knowing that newer, cooler, more powerful, and more versatile ICTs are inevitably coming? And knowing that the pace of innovation in the technology sector far outpaces our ability to innovate in the policy sector to help guide and lead and react to these innovations. We're often asked at the World Bank some very narrow technology questions by ministries of education. Should we be using open or proprietary tools? Should we be looking at the use of computers or phones in our education system? Should we be thinking about computers in computer labs, or should we think about mobile solutions? Which should we choose? Our answer to all those things is yes. All of these things are relevant to you depending on what your context and individual circumstances are. And given the rate that things change, we need to be open-minded about the choices we make today and how they might change tomorrow. Question number 2, how can we innovate using what we already have? Given that newer, cooler things are coming, they may be coming too slowly, or they may be too expensive, but how can we use the abundant technologies that we may have already in our societies, but which we may be overlooking? It's an open question. A quick tour around the world of some interesting innovations. Tomorrow, Professor Sugata Mitra will be talking about his hole-in-the-wall initiative, where he took a computer, embedded it in a wall in a slum in New Delhi, in India, and stood back and watched what happens. And lo and behold, many kids were excited by this and taught themselves how to use this computer. Now, some people have taken this as proof that you don't need to teach children, you just need to give them the technology and back up. And while there is some truth to parts of that, this idea, if you build it, they will come, I think misses a lot of the important lessons of this experience. The hole-in-the-wall experiment is, I think, a testimony to, even if you put technology in places, the ability to marshal local communities and to inform them of the power and potential of these tools and to develop content to run on these tools is just as important as the tool itself. On this theme of content, user-generated content is the theme of the debate here on Friday, and we see tremendous potential for this across Africa and across the world. Things related to open educational resources, they're called. There are numerous examples that we see of how users are creating resources and sharing them openly across Africa, in Tanzania, and across the world. Here are some notable examples on the screen. At the World Bank last year, we sponsored an online educational game called Evoke. It was a way to engage students outside of school or under the guidance of teachers to go through an exploration of and identify various challenges in their local community and work together to solve social problems across Africa and across the world. And as part of that, the students themselves developed huge amounts of educational content that they were able to share with each other. Over 25 students from around the world, half of them in Africa, participated in this online game, a perhaps non-traditional use of computer technology in many African education systems. We see many other uses, non-traditional uses related to video gaming, simulations, remote manipulation of experiments at a distance that we see happening in pockets across Africa that we're very excited about. We also see innovative approaches to working with the private sector and how government, in many cases, ministries of education not used to working with private sector partners, but being forced into it, if you will, or taking opportunity of advantages that the private sector offer. We see them increasingly moving from a backdoor position to more of the driver's seat to help actually influence directions in the local marketplace. The community. Many ICT and education professionals like to joke, if it is a joke, that they see ICTs transforming education everywhere but in the classroom. We look at the use of computers and phones in our society and we say, why aren't people using the computers like they are in the community telecenter, like they are in schools? What is not happening in schools that should be happening? Some people say, well, we should put computers in labs and schools, and this is really a locus or a place for innovation to happen in the school. This may be the case. Although in some cases it may also not be the case. It may be by sequestering computers in specific places in schools. Oftentimes this can be seen as a barrier to innovation as well. So there is perhaps no right answer to that. In Uruguay, Uruguay is the first country in the world where every student has her own free computer. They've decided to do away with computer labs altogether. That's okay. They're rich enough, if you will, to afford to be able to do that. In Thailand, they have opened up the computer labs where there's no longer a computer teacher, but rather the labs are to be used expressly by subject level teachers. And there is a computer assistant there to help teachers use the computers in their normal teaching activities. We see computers put on wheels around schools to also make them more mobile. And we see them used in a variety of ways to contact with the local community. We also see interesting examples of dealing with the problem of technical support. Technical support is the bane of many ICT and education initiatives around the world. How can we keep these things running? How can we repair them? It's an expensive process. We've seen student computer clubs used as first line technical support in schools, not only helping maintain computers at a lower cost, but also developing useful, marketable skills on the part of students, and developing a sense of self-worth and responsibility that is perhaps even more important. Theme number three, the personal. This is the flag of Uruguay. Uruguay is a small country in the middle of South America. As I mentioned, the first country in the world, or second. The first country is actually a small Pacific island called Niue, but that only has 2 schools, so I won't count it here. But the first country to have every student have her own personal computer. And this movement towards one-to-one computing is something that we hear and see rhetorically resonate in many places around the world. In Uruguay, they see the education sector and the use of computers in education as important, but also they see the sector as a vector for introducing change into society. They gave each student her own computer not just to improve test scores. In fact, that's not even in the first list of reasons why they've done it, but they figure having a computer with a child means that every home has a computer. And they figured that was one quick way to introduce change. Now, this is something that would have seemed outlandish even 5 years ago in Uruguay, and it's a reality there today. Whether it's a reality here for many of you now, probably not, but as we all know, the pace of technological change makes things possible 5 years from now that perhaps are only a pipe dream today. One-to-one computing in many ways is fundamentally different. When you have your own computer and able to use it whenever and wherever you want, it offers up the possibility for computer-assisted support and computer-enabled learning that you don't have when they're in computer labs. Theme number 4, mobile. The mobile phone. Now, is the mobile phone just a new opportunity for photos, or does it offer promising new opportunities for reading and for literacy? This is a question I think that many of us will be talking about over these 3 days here. I would like to, before I try to attempt an answer to that question, provide you, and if I apologize, I mean no offense, to provide you with some quick data about toilets. The number of mobile subscriptions in the world is expected to pass $5 billion this year. Actually, that happened last November, according to the International Telecommunications Union. The importance of that number is that that means that more humans today have access to a cell phone than they have access to a clean toilet. Now, we may lament that fact. It's certainly not something we should be proud of, but it shows the potential opportunity we have to take advantage of a computing resource that's walking around in people's pockets and purses at levels that would have been unimaginable only recently. Sesame Street, the television program that in many ways has been a leader in approaches to the use of technology in education, has said that their future is in the mobile phone and no longer in television. I think that is a very important signal about the importance and potential utility of this device. We see, and we'll hear this week, many examples of innovative initial approaches and uses of technology, mobile technologies in education, whether in Bangladesh, India, China, and from some places across Africa as well. Indeed, this technology is increasingly pervasive, increasingly powerful, increasingly inexpensive, increasingly personal, and it is, of course, increasingly mobile. For many people, it's the last thing they touch, for better or for worse, before they go to bed at night. They put it under their pillow, their spouse perhaps accepted, and the first thing they reach for in the morning. So it offers an opportunity for learning that is personal and that is 24/7. Mobile, anytime, anywhere, then. But people say, can you really read with these things? Or can you read on them? Well, 4 years ago, 5 of the top 10 best-selling novels in Japan were so-called keitai shosetsu. These were cell phone novels, and these were actually written originally on phones and published via text messaging and read on phones originally, most part by and for young people. So at least in Japan, it seems like you can do some reading on here. We have some interesting examples from South Africa with the M4 Lit project that we'll hear about this week, where students are sharing information, reading short stories. Maybe students who don't have very many books in their house, if any, are able to read short novels on their mobile phone. Isn't the screen too small, you ask? Well, this was a research question posed by a researcher in Texas in a school district in the United States. And the response from the students was that we don't understand the question. The screen size is the screen size. It's neither too big or too small. This is just what we're used to. So some of our conceptions about the use of these technologies, perhaps, are the conceptions of those of us who are coming to them initially and are not growing up with them. There's an interesting project in southern India called Mile, where they're using educational games in rural villages to help promote literacy, especially around the use of English, outside of school and off hours. And I just raised one point. I don't know who can read this, perhaps up front or up back. If you can, I applaud you. I have trouble reading it on the screen in front of me. But I note that even for some people, having a fewer number of words on the screen makes it easier to digest and to weed out the noise. And so I submit that the amount of information presented on the mobile screen is neither too much or too little. It's just what a mobile phone can provide. Can you write with them? Well, we see interesting examples in China where people are writing novels and students are using mobile phones to create and submit homework as well. Here's an interesting software application called StoryKit. Aren't they distracting? Well, certainly. We track 52 countries around the world where phones are banned in schools. I don't know if they're banned in Tanzania or banned in Tanzania yet, but this is something that there are definite trade-offs. They are the newest and latest digital distraction device, if you will, yet they still offer a great opportunity as well. So this picture, perhaps, will this picture be the picture we think about when we think about technology use, innovative technology use in school settings, with this young boy fascinated by this small screen in front of him, and you can see a number of his fellow students sitting against the wall next to him, fascinated by their own screen. Well, there's still all sorts of questions we have about this, related to privacy, related to inappropriate content, related to how this relates to students with certain physical challenges or disabilities, costs, or content issues, all sorts of ethnographic studies we need to do. So I note that while the potential is there, and I think is very real, there's still much more we don't know about how to realize this potential than what we do know today. But we do see it used here in Tanzania as part of the Bridge IT project, supporting teachers who are able to use mobile phones to call digital content in the service of lessons that they're teaching in schools. And this has been happening for a few years here in Tanzania, in the Philippines, and now in Chile as well. But as I said, we're still in early days. Indeed, the mobile phone may be the wrong term, if you will. I'm talking about something that's small and portable. And of course, as we all know, phones are used less and less for actually phoning someone and are used for many other type of activities, texting foremost among them. Now, one question we like to ask at the World Bank as countries roll out large educational technology initiatives and think about the content they want to deliver on computers is, can you afford today to develop content that's only useful on a PC? If 5 years from now, you know that more and more teachers and students will be accessing on a phone, we think even if phones are not relevant today, you should be planning for their use. and think about how to access content on multiple devices. A vice president of Google noted a few years ago that since 1982, the price of data storage has fallen by a factor of 3.6 million. And this means that if the trend continues, we'll soon be able to hold all the world's content on an iPod device, and all the world's music will fit in the palm of your hand by 2015. Now, whether this trend actually comes true by these dates, I don't know, but it highlights the fact that some of our challenges related to connectivity, while very real, also there are opportunities to move content closer to people, given the increasing memory and storage available on these devices as well. Finally, measuring. How do we know what's effective? And how do we know actually what's cost effective? How do we know how and if ICTs can help make schools more productive and efficient than they currently are? How can they help transform teaching and learning into a real and engaging active process connected to real life? And how can they help, or how do they help prepare the current generation of young people for the future workforce? Indeed, how do we know and how can we approach answers to these very basic and fundamental questions? That's a question. Actually, we have lots of questions, I think, still about that. But where should we be aiming when we ask these questions? There's a worry that if we're not looking forward and anticipating current trends, and if, in fact, what we do is look backward, we may be missing the mark. So are we satisfied with the existing measures of impact and the tools that we have? Is the impact of technology use in schools the fact that we have X number of schools connected to the internet and X number of computers sitting in labs? Perhaps, or perhaps part of that. But perhaps we should be looking at other measures of impact as well. Indeed, is there scope for being innovative in the way we measure impact by using the technology itself? Whether it's for so-called gold standard of impact evaluation for randomized controlled trials, whether it's, for example, through the use, as is being piloted in Haiti and India, and the use of digital cameras to help monitor and ensure teacher attendance in schools. And in Uruguay, as I mentioned earlier, they're interested not just in the impact of technology use in schools on learning outcomes themselves, but on a wider set of societal impact measures, because they think that once you introduce the technology in the hands of a student, you're introducing it into the hands of a citizen of the country. And there are many other things that could justify related investments. There is
winding up, yeah, thank you.
And finally, there is a movement to look at a whole set of 21st century skills, of which ICTs and ICT literacy is one part. And in conclusion, I ask, can we afford for our investments to promote innovation and the use of ICTs to benefit education just to be a faith-based initiative? I opened with this symbol, or this picture of a light bulb representing innovation, asking, is innovation the result of a bright idea or a commitment to rigorous testing and trial and error? These are questions, I think open questions that I have, and I'm looking forward to learning how others are approaching answers to these questions as well. On the screen is some places you can find more information and background studies from the World Bank that help inform us as we help and try to work with many of you to answer these questions. Thank you.
Thank you.